Could you please share with us who you are and the work that you do?
Sure. So I'm Barbara Patterson, and I work with leaders and entrepreneurs, solopreneurs from around the world.
Mm,
And really, over the last 10 years, my work in particular has been helping leaders, business owners, people that have a dream or a way they want to express themselves in the world,
mm,
how to understand that there's an internal landscape
mm,
that is shaping everything we're up to.
mm,
And when we have an awareness of it and an understanding of it, it allows us to leverage that in a more powerful way for our impact, for our ability to lead, to connect, to influence. And so I have my whole adult life has been in the field of transformation, whether it was personal or organizational transformation or leadership transformation. And I've been an executive inside of a company leading a large global function and decided to go out on my own again about 10, 11 years ago. And I used to look at transformation in a very complex way. It looked hard, it looked tough, it looked challenging. There were places inside of me that I really wanted to change, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't do it. And it wasn't until I started to look at both an understanding of our mind
mm,
and an understanding of this kind of deeper nature we all have inside of us,
mm.
this well of creativity and resilience, and how those work together to really help us function and live in the world and to, step into our dreams more.
Wow. So the whole transformation is through the process of self-discovery. Am I
Yes.
okay?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so let's
But
discover that together. All right. I'll bring you all the way
okay.
to when you were a little girl. Okay. And
Right.
when I was young, when I was a kid, I always wanted to become an astronaut, and life hit me hard. I'm not capable of doing so. So I did take me to another journey, and so I want to know, a young version of Barbara. What did you dream? One day you're gonna grow up and become, so, what kind of job you're gonna do? Can you share with us that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have two memories.
Mm.
And the first is I fantasized about being an actress. I
Wow.
was that girl that held the brush in the mirror and acted and moved and danced. And, I just used to fantasize. And I did some theater type things as a young girl and competitions in that direction. And that was a big part of my fantasy life as a little girl. But I'll also tell you that when I was around, I think around 10 years old, maybe 11, my mom took me to hear Leo Buscaglia talk.
Mm.
And you may or may not know him, but he's kind of one of the first self help authors out there. And he really talked about family dynamics, he talked about love. And I remember being in the audience and getting really struck by him. And I watched him have this beautiful impact in the room and touch people. And on the way home with my mom, I said to her, that's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to help people. I want to make people feel good. I want to make people happy. So those are my two stories.
Wow. So one story become reality.
It's true. It's true.
I want to
Yeah.
bring you to the talk back then when you were 10, 11. Your mom took you to that event, right?
Yeah.
Because at 10 and 11 we're still too young and yet mature to have that deep level of thinking, right? And deep sense of of purpose. So how did that talk resonate to you and give you a purpose that you want to help people to grow? Can you share that?
Yeah, I think that first of all, I'd never been exposed to anything like that.
Okay.
I was raised, my mom was a single mother. She raised seven of us. I'm the second youngest, so we were all kind of scrappy.
Uh,
And, we didn't have a lot of money, but we had a good life and she took care of us well. But we were all really fiercely independent because we had to parent ourselves a lot because she was working and earning money and doing all those things. And so it was a simple life, but with a lot of love and a lot of craziness. A lot, you know, we could tell a lot of stories, but I think what that did for me was, um, you know, I knew from my own experience what it can feel like to get the rug pulled out from under you. You know, I think I was one of those kids that I loved to laugh and I loved to have a good, make people laugh, and I was curious and happy, but I was also thought like I had a lot on my mind. Like life wasn't easy, and so I was an observer of people. I was, you know, I learned early how to read a room. And, you know, yeah, I think there was always a part of me that wanted to ease people's suffering or make people happy or help people. Yeah.
And then how's the journey after that? Because you know, at 10 and 11, and we have a lot of dream, we have a lot of curiosity, you know, and then you've been observer of people.
Yeah.
So when you get into the higher education, there's a lot of other choices that you could also help the world and help the people, right? And
Yeah.
but you consistently follow the dream at the 10 and 11 years old. Tell us that, yeah.
Yeah. So here's the fascinating part. It was not consistent and it was not linear. I spent actually, you know, that moment is really resonant, but my, you know, what I wanted to do, did I want to do acting? I changed my major like 5 times in college. I was everything from a dietitian to deaf education teacher to business. I was a lost young adult. I did not know what I was meant to do. I didn't feel that way. I felt lost. I wasn't a good student. I couldn't really find my way. College wasn't working out. I had amazing friends, but education wasn't working. And so I made a decision to pull out, and I went and volunteered in Africa for a number of months. And when I came back, life offered me an opportunity to work at the university where I had gone and to work in an area that was helping the students around things like self-esteem and their confidence. So life gave me this, you know, and a man who was a mentor gave me an opportunity to step into this role. And what's fascinating is then I can see my very indirect path, but if you looked at it, you would see this woman that was like, okay, I have this, I'm going to help here. And then I went and tried something else. And then I tried something else. And yet the thread was, I'd always been interested in people and why we were the way we were and how to improve and how to bring our best self and how to do all of that. So that was the constant. And eventually, life kept putting me in places that allowed me to, you know, work in that direction. But I share this because I think people will relate. I spent many years trying to find my purpose, not really understanding that where I was purposeful.
Wow. And you see, there was one of the speaker joining my program, and she shared that her admiration for her boss is because, you know, when people look at you now and look at him now, they see all the success, but they don't see how struggle he has been through the path that making him to become who he is today. Same for you, right? And some people is lucky to have, you know, they have a smooth path,
Yeah.
you know, from
Yeah.
point A to point B, and then you know, like a lot of other people, we have to go through different paths that you can get to the destination, and thanks for sharing that. So as long as we have the resilience and the commitment to get to where we want to become, I think that we will find a way, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's an illusion that it's like really linear, you know, that it's a straight path. I think when we all look to our life, we see it's a lot of pivots and adjustments and lessons learned and a deepening of who we are. And more understanding about who we are, and all of that kind of feeds our life.
Mm,
And I think this idea that there's only one, that once we arrive and we figure out what it is, everything will be amazing.
mm,
That quest created a lot of suffering for me
mm,
because I kept thinking I would be happier, life would flow better, everything would be great if I just knew my purpose.
mm,
But it wasn't until I realized, what if every step I take is me living on purpose?
mm,
What is the opportunity and what's available to me in the here and now? And what I started to see was, oh, yeah, there's something that is alive in us that can be expressed wherever we are.
mm.
Now, don't get me wrong, when you look back in hindsight, I can see the magic of it. I can see the magic and how I am where I am because of all of that. I
Mm,
just want to share that on the journey at times it looked like I was off.
mm,
And I don't know that I was really ever off.
mm. Wow. So if you connecting all the dots back and see, the dot when it's connected is a beautiful journey that make who we are today. Uh, some people don't have that luxury to to connecting the dot and get and found the purpose. So so if you can reread all of your life past that take you to who you are today, can you summarize what keep you kept giving you strength and courageous to continue taking those paths?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question because I think it points to something that's true for all of us.
Mm,
That if we look to our life, we will see that resilience is innate.
mm,
It's a part of our nature.
mm,
Like we are made to rise to the occasion. We're
mm,
made to figure life out.
mm,
And so when you look, like coming back to my mom as an example,
mm,
when my dad left, she tells a story of how she stayed in bed for a couple days because she, as understandably so, right? Like
mm,
just not sure how she was going to do it. And she said that she had the thought, get out of bed. You have 7 children to raise. Now, that thought didn't come with a user's manual. She had no idea how she was going to put food on the table. She had no idea how she was going to be a mother and a father. She had no idea how she was going to get through this, much less help all 7 of us get through it, right? But she showed up every day.
mm,
And in every way, she found her way. She did what occurred to her. She rose to the occasion. Well, that's one version, right? And if we all look to our lives, we'll see how, oh yeah, we're made. Resilience is innate, and
mm,
we've been figuring out our way our whole lives. And I think it's important to see that because, in a way, I'm not special. You're not special,
mm,
right? We all have this within us, and so being able to see and realize that we have that so no matter what life is serving up, we can handle it. We can see we're okay no matter what, that we have it within us to figure things out, I think is a really powerful stance and understanding.
mm. Your mom is a wonderful individual, and I think she plays a big role model, big figure in your life. And was there anything that when you grow up, learning from her and adapt it to yourself?
Yeah, yeah, and listen, I was the typical teenager that, thought my mom didn't know a thing. So, you know, I went through that period as well. But as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate, more of her strength and beauty. And I think that all of my brothers and sisters and I would agree that our tenacity,
Mm,
our willingness to, like, know that life can be hard, but you can find your way, comes from
mm,
her. She
mm,
has a commitment to family, and so I think we all have a love of each other, even though we haven't always liked each other.
mm,
At the end of the day, we're there for one another. And I think that because of my childhood, that fierce independence, she worked hard. So I have her work ethic and, her, all of that. But I think the independence has been a huge asset, and at times can also, have the double edge to it, right?
Mm. Barbara, go to the let's go to the point where you went to your university and work, right? And from there you had people to feel, to grow and to feel, what is that, to help them get into the new life, and
Yeah.
successfully. It's like a consulting things, right?
Yes.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then how did your career journey from there take place for you to become an executive for an organizations, and can you share with us after that?
Yeah. So I started out in the field of personal development. So I used to teach public in my 20s, used to teach public seminars,
Ah,
and they were focused on, they were based on psychology.
mm,
So who you are as a child shapes who you are today, and how do you understand that and,
excuse me.
move forward. When I was doing that, I started getting asked by some of the attendees to come into their offices to work with
Ah,
their teams. And then that started my work inside of companies. And then I had one individual who asked me to come be a part of his team, and he wanted to build a personal and a professional function inside his organization. He wanted to offer both of those. So that was me stepping totally into the unknown, but he saw in me that I had it within me to do that, and I was a learner. I've always loved to learn. So that became my first inside of a company, working in organizational development and leadership development and learning all over. So then that began my corporate career, which led to a couple of, different opportunities. I want to also share that at two different times, once in my 20s and once in my 30s, I tried to go out on my own.
ah,
And I was young, naive, and it was amazing. And yet, I wasn't smart and strategic in certain things. So financially, it became, not viable. So you could say I failed two times, right? And then, but when I got over the idea that of failure, I got an opportunity inside the last company I worked for. They hired me first as a consultant, and then they offered me a full-time position
mm,
to start their organizational development function in North America. And that company I worked with for about 8 years. And then they moved me to Paris to start a global function.
mm,
And I would say that company is just a great example of where it was a mutually beneficial relationship.
mm,
I was able to contribute a lot. I helped with the team. We helped create a lot of really good, impactful things inside the company,
mm,
and they gave me opportunity.
mm,
They developed me and they promoted me, and so I was able in that job to travel around the world, to work with leaders, to really understand, leaders from different countries and
mm,
different sizes of organizations. And so when I decided to leave that company, it was really just a personal nudge telling me it was time to
mm.
go back out on my own. And then now I've been doing that for almost 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Barbara, a lot of executives that I know, they have two things that they regret when they retire. The first thing is that they they wish they could started their own company when they were younger. Okay. Number two is writing a book. Okay. And because of the cumulative experience and life and management experience that they've been having, they can put it on a writing and stuff like that. But they got too busy with works and stuff, and they could not do it when they could have been doing, right? So I want to ask you this question. You said that you respond to the nudge, that personal nudge, 11 years ago. It's a good time to get back and doing your own consulting firms again after the first two times have failed. Okay, we consider it as a trial and error. We don't consider it as fail. Right.
Third time's the charm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I want to know that, when you're in the organization, you had the and you have a great scope on your hand. You have a lot of things that you can contribute to the organization and to the people also, and
Uh,
and it's stable because in that role everything is provided. You are well taken care of, but you decided to try to go out into the wandering world again, and try to get into the unknown and the uncertainties again. Why?
yeah. You know, I think ultimately it comes down to that the knowing that
Mm,
it was the right move to make
mm,
was louder than the fear of it may not work again.
mm,
It became, it's funny because when I shared with the company and
mm,
I had a lot of good relationships and I wasn't leaving because of a problem, to your
mm,
point, so I
mm,
was leaving something really good on so many levels.
mm,
And it was interesting because a lot of the other executives would come to me and I would hear a couple things. One is what you would say. I'd hear somebody say, "Oh, I really want to do that. I've been thinking about doing that, but I can't. I can't because of, for whatever reasons, right?"
mm,
And then I would hear other people say, kind of, "You're so brave. You're so brave. You're so brave to do this." But, what was interesting was when I decided to just let that nudge have space and room and really consider it, that certainty, my certainty that it was the right decision rose,
mm,
right? Like and so I got so solid inside myself that I knew, okay, there's no guarantee that this will work. I've got two times it's failed before,
uh-huh,
right? If anything, it looks like not a good idea.
mm,
But because I gave space and I
mm,
let that nudge have room and I really listened, I could feel that it is the next move. I don't know what's going to happen a week after that, a month after that, a year after that, but I knew my next move.
mm,
So all that was required was for me to take that next move.
mm,
And then what I've discovered over these 10 years is when we listen to that, when we allow the space and we listen to that inner nudge, to that guidance, and we move from it,
mm,
we get information. We get new ideas, new information, connections, but it requires movement. Like I thought if I thought about it enough and strategized enough and had all the answers that then I would move.
mm.
Well, it's the exact opposite. That
Ah,
created more uncertainty,
mm. I see.
right?
I I happened to read a book by Ethan, I forgot his last name, Cruz or so, and he wrote the book named Chatter, and and remember 11 years ago when you had this discussion, there was a lot of voice around you and within you, and how did you quiet all of that chatter and then keep only the voice and the space for your nudge to lead you to that final destination though.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to say that I never felt insecure,
Mm,
but because I did. But once I started to listen
mm,
and speak into what that dream was,
mm,
what that nudge was, my boldness naturally increased.
ah,
My clarity
mm,
came from that place. I started to, realize that, like the CEO brought me in and said, "Are you like sure this is a good idea?"
mm,
Like, like he in his way trying to be supportive to me. He was like, "Forget about we don't want to lose you, but like, are you really sure this is a good time to build a business and this is a." So but what was funny, all those conversations strengthened my knowing,
ah, okay.
right? Because
Mm,
I kept listening from that deeper intuition, that deeper wisdom inside versus all my mind chatter,
mm,
versus the insecure thinking.
mm. Barbara, and then for that 11 amazing years, you've been helping organizations and teams to grow and find the insights so that they can achieve outstanding performance. And and in your introduction profile, it says all about because of the state of mind. All
Yeah.
right, it
Yeah.
boils down to the state of mind, and it's new to me. So, and can you share why you come to that conclusion?
Yeah. So, as I shared with you, I've been in the field of transformation and change for 30 years.
Mm,
So, this idea of you would have an executive or a leader that wanted to improve their communication skills,
mm,
yet they'd get in the middle of a debate and all their training would go out the window and they'd become aggressive or directive, right? Like
mm,
they had a sincere desire to want to do it different. They know it's not a good idea, that their style needs some help,
mm,
but they would struggle with that change. And I would look at that and I'd be confused. And so I would be like, well, is it commitment? Is it just their personality? That's
mm,
just the way they are.
mm,
Is it that they don't care?
mm,
Like we try and figure it out. I would look at that around myself, like, oh, wow, I'd love to be healthier and all that kind of stuff. And I'd watch myself being consistent. And so then I would analyze, well, is it my childhood? Is it my lack of commitment? Is it, like I try and figure out
mm,
these things. Well, once I realized that there's a variable that is invisible that informs how we show up moment to moment. I hadn't factored in that variable, and that variable is what I'm calling your inner climate, your state of mind.
mm,
So, coming back to that leader as an example, all the best training in the goes out the window if he walks into a meeting and he's rushed, irritated, other things on his mind, needing upset about something. All the training goes out the window because what do people feel?
mm,
And what informs his words is
mm,
his inner state. His inner state is informing what he says, how he says it. It informs his inability to
mm,
connect, to slow down. And then what does the receiver get? The words don't land. It's the feeling that lands,
mm,
right? So this variable, this hidden variable around your inner state, your state of mind, has the ability to amplify your capabilities, and it has the ability to derail.
mm,
So if I have no awareness of where I'm really coming from inside myself,
mm,
I'm I'm pulling the wrong lever, right?
mm.
I'm not pulling the right lever. I'm trying to control my behavior without appreciating if you would just slow down inside,
Mm, wow.
all of this would be so much easier.
Wow. How can we make sure that our state of mind is always calm and in the right, and lead us to the right directions, given that, there's a lot of things that can hit us, moment by
Yes,
moment, and our mind, will be like an animal that been boxed in the cage, and then if and we might be, lose our well intended thoughts and just let it run wild. Can you teach us
yeah,
how we can give
yeah,
that space really, strong foundation?
yeah. So the first thing I want to say is that state of mind, our internal state is fluid. It's changing all day long. So it's not a fixed thing. So the idea that we will get to a calm place and stay there that's not how it works, right? It's fluid. So the first understand that it's not about attaining perfection. That's just not possible. Thoughts come and go. We live in the feeling of our thinking. Since thoughts fluid, that means our feelings and internal state is fluid. So just understanding that helps us, because sometimes that phrase, this too shall pass, is true. This too shall pass. So if we know that, and I don't have to get in there and fix it and get better thinking and rearrange it, I just need to know I'm in this will pass. On the other side of this internal reactivity, this sped upness, is more perspective, more clarity, and slowed down. So our knowing that, getting a feel for, oh, I'm reactive, getting a feel for, I'm really sped up, getting a feel for, I'm rushed, I'm distracted. Those things will help us because we can factor it in the moment. So, like if I love to hike, if it's raining or it's cold, I factor that in, right? I bring a jacket or I bring something to cover myself. So if oh wow, I'm kind of sped up here, then you'll factor that in. You'll pull the right lever. You'll go, I want to slow down. How do I slow down? So there's lots of different answers to that. Some people will say they take a breath. Some people, just the moment they notice they're sped up, it means you have more perspective in that moment than you did the moment before. Because if we see it, we have some distance to it. So that allows us then to consciously begin to move in the direction of slowing down and maybe taking a couple breaths. Or when we can't slow down, we know that we're sped up and it's not a good idea to have that meeting. It's not a good idea to talk to our partner from this place, right? It's right. Like, I need a minute or I need a day, so then we don't have to go in and clean up anything because we factor it in. We're like, oh yeah, I'm not in the best mood right now to have this conversation. Or actually with a lot of entrepreneurs, what I help them see is when they're bogged down trying to push through and find innovation that way, it doesn't happen. Innovation, creativity comes from a freer, spacious internal state. So when we're overthinking something and we're trying to think our way into something fresh, it doesn't work that way. So again, it comes back to awareness. So we'll get a feel for, I'm bogged down, I'm overthinking. And then in what you do to address that is some people will go take a walk. You lay the project down. I'll just say it's, there's a ton of studies out there, right? But it's like, what are the top 3 places people get their best ideas? If you had to guess.
Say it again, sorry. I lost that part.
If you had to guess what the top 3 places are people get their best ideas, what do you think they might be?
Quiet time in the nature and go for a walk, things like that.
Exactly. Showers.
A shower.
Right. Driving and nature. Right. And why is that? It's because we slow down. We come more into the present moment. Our thinking, our internal state slows down. We take the problem off our mind. And then we get helpful ideas. Like, that's how the mind works for all of us. So when we understand there's diminishing returns on pressure and push and overriding, there are diminishing returns. Our mental bandwidth, our thinking actually gets constricted in those states. And yet we're trying to think fresh ideas, feel more resilient, connect to our well-being. Well, that's all, to the degree that we're constricted, that's harder to do. But again, when we understand in a freer, more present, spacious, open, slowed down state, we naturally access more mental bandwidth. We access more creativity, more well-being, more perspective, better thinking.
Thanks for sharing that, Barbara. It's like we check our post-check before we to make a decision on something like that. And this, there was a lot of materials that we read about, and and then I think for executive, they are clever enough to know. But then from the knowing to the executing it, is a huge gap in there. I take an example like this. I have a beautiful Angel. She was my boss, and when I first came to Vietnam, and then so her intention is always pure, always good for people. But then under some circumstances, maybe a personal relationship, maybe the pressure of budgeting and stuff like that, and then sometimes she forgot to check her post check, and it just and in the management meeting, if it's just a word that can create some big tensions for her.
Yeah.
And every time like that, I told her that I say, let's say Miss X, put it that way, check your project because I think that you're not doing it well. Yeah. So and I really appreciate she, because she the moment that we say so, she just realized that, oh, okay, I need to calm down and then retake another path. But not a lot of boss will do that. Not a lot of boss will go to a very different directions for that. So how can we help people to make sure that they can always, from the knowing of checking, the size, and then to the fully controlling of that whole process, so that they can always give some quiet space before they, let the
Yeah.
inner self, the fluid
Yeah.
to become. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that we would all agree that in business, the ability to be mentally and emotionally agile
Mm,
and the ability to problem solve are key assets
mm.
to business success. Creativity, innovation, the ability to bounce back, right, when
Yep.
something doesn't work and stay the course, like you're saying. Well, when people understand that there's a relationship between your internal state and your ability to do those things,
Mm.
I think they respect more or respect less that kind of that driven, crazy, push mentality, right?
Mm.
When they really understand, like, no, no, your best thinking doesn't come from there. Your employees' best thinking doesn't come from there. I'll give you one example. I worked with this leader one time, and he believed that you had to create edge and tension in people to get them to perform,
Okay.
right? He thought that brought out the best. But when I did an intake and was interviewing, and doing an analysis of the culture and all that, I discovered how much what had happened. He was telling me they're not strategic enough. My people aren't strategic enough. And what I discovered was his idea of edge and making people feel on edge was keeping them from being creative.
Mm.
Because what would happen, they would show up and he would have edge and tension and emotion and pressure. And pretty soon they weren't thinking how to bring their good ideas there. They were thinking, how do I say what he wants to hear?
Mm.
Right? And this is common with executives and their teams. Their teams get into a habit, and these are smart, amazing people.
Mm.
But if you have an executive that is, kind of thinking edge and pressure are the way to build, what happens is people use their mental bandwidth thinking how to please them,
Mm.
how to give them what they want, rather than how to bring their own thinking, their own creativity to the table.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. Or they will leave the organization and looking for
Totally,
better.
totally. Yeah.
Yep.
And listen, there's science, there's data now, there's so much out there to say that environment and culture matters.
Mm.
And, that if you can learn to create an environment where your people can access their own creativity, their own problem solving, their own strategy, and their well being,
Mm.
like that too. Like, did you know we can do business and be really successful without overriding self-care and without working insane hours, and you can hear it globally. There's this sort of uprising after the pandemic of people saying, I don't want to go back to that, I can't go back to that.
Yep, yep. And then the at the beginning, I thought the great resignation is only temporary, until the more that we talk to business leaders, the more that those leaders travel the world, it become even more real for them that this gonna stay for long, and that
Yeah.
also requires us as managers and leader has to unlearn what we thought was
Yeah.
once right and relearn something that can make us relevant, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for us to change and stay relevant, there's a lot of traditional leadership skills and things like that need to totally eradicate and build new again. So, Barbara, if we want to eradicate our own state of mind to give more bandwidth for the new state of mind, where do we start from the beginning?
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to say, because I think you're right, like everybody in a way is doing the best they can. They're doing what makes sense to them. So leaders are saying we need to go back because this is what helped us grow. This is what brought in the bottom line. We have shareholders, we have employees to pay, we've got, so the idea they are used to success coming from one way, right? Which looks like, push hard effort, overwork, all of that.
Mm,
But what people are really saying is there's another way.
mm,
But that requires that we come to the table again and get creative. It means that companies may have to relook at workforce and how they do it. It means that they've got to look at the goals. But you see, it doesn't, I think people are afraid they have to give up success.
mm,
And I don't believe that. I think that we have within us the creative potential to figure all these things out, but we've got to come to the table
mm,
and talk about it and get curious and open and bring our best thinking to the table of how do we reimagine this culture,
mm,
not without having to sacrifice well-being of our employees or the money, the bottom line. How do we reimagine that? Listen, we have reimagined so many things in our lives and in this world. We can reimagine this.
yep,
We can,
mm,
but it does require first and foremost a willingness to listen, to
mm.
consider, and to come back to the table on a few of those things.
Wow. Thanks for using the word reimagine because
Yeah.
everything beautiful that we've been creating is also coming a lot from somebody's imagined about the new world, the new product, new services. And this uncertainty brought us to, be more creative, be more collaborative so that we can recreate and something, more sustainably. And I always believe in our potential because we as human beings, like your mom, remember,
Yeah.
she got in her bed for a couple of days. She can be, upset. She can be,
Yeah. Yeah.
at tears for about that. But then she recreate, reimagine, what's the new lives to be, so that she can be showing up and taking care for her 7 kids, and we as organization, as leader, can do the same as long as we have the intention to do so.
That's
And
right. That's right.
yeah, and I hope that those leaders, those who listen to this conversation, will have more intention in what they want to do and carry that legacy longer for something that more sustainable for everybody. And
Yeah.
uh, and Barbara, I want to ask you one very specific questions about thinking. All right,
Okay.
because your works requires you to do a lot of thinking, and if the whole conversation from the beginning up until now, in your whole life, there was a lot of moment of self-thinking of how to be transforming, and you ask yourself a lot of hard questions. And
Mhm.
my wife and I is in the quest of looking for ways to help the people around us to improve their ability to think, because we see it's actually declining, not increasing. And if every chance we got to talk to somebody experts about that, we want to unveil the secret. So how for the how do you create the environment and force yourself to think deep and think big? Can you share?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think I first had to see that analyzation wasn't insight.
Hmm.
analyzing and ruminating wasn't aha moments and out of the blue ideas, that those moments came from somewhere else. Now, my analytical brain, my intellectual thinking, I love that part of me, and it's valuable for all leaders and for all of us as human beings. But we have a whole nother resource available to us that I don't know we've thought much about. And that resource is that kind of inner well of being, that essence where those out of the blue ideas come, where we can be driving and have a fresh idea come to us that we're all excited about. And so when I saw that shifts of consciousness, shifts of understanding, new insight it's a vertical lane, right? It's something changing inside. And then there's all my data compiling and my analyzation and my looking and observing, and that's more horizontal. See, I somehow thought that if I thought about it enough, somehow it would lead to something. And I realized, like, oh yeah, no, it's a different channel. And then how do we access that channel is what you and I have said. Freer, more spacious. So what am I doing to take things off my mind? What am I doing to come more into the present moment? What am I doing to create space in my day and my schedule and my life? Because there is a relationship between that spaciousness and the quality ideas we get and the quality thinking. And so that do I know the difference inside of me? And once I started to get my own nuanced feeling of, oh yeah, there's this deeper channel, this like other channel with creative thinking and well-being and more perspective. And then there's my mind, which has a ton of good data and information and analysis and rumination. But if I had to, if like this is impossible, right? But I would say prior to getting more curious about where creativity comes from, where new ideas and connection lives in us, I was living my life here. I was living my life in the intellectual and the processing and and I loved it. It was fun and interesting and fascinating. But when I started to open myself up to this other place in us that has kind of different quality of life and feeling and thinking, that's when my ideas, my well-being, my ability to connect to people in a more impactful way, that was the game changer. Not getting better this.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. Giving ourselves the space so that we can be, having time for ourselves, for our time to reconnecting, and from there, new ideas actually will emerge, and it open a new reservoir of ability to think something totally different than they used to be, analytical word that in our head and all the time, right? So definitely, that is something that amazing, and thanks for sharing that, Barbara. I have two last questions for you, okay? And the first question is regarding to the two experience that when you get out of the corporate life and starting your business, we have a lot of people, especially at a younger age, who always, have a high passion of starting their businesses, and it's good to share, our experience of why we failed at the beginning, and if we can, if you can advise the version of you and the 20, and then the version of you and yet at 30, how to make those business experience a success, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that from a pure business maturity kind of aspect, I had a lot of naiveness. Now, the naiveness was actually good because it made me more daring. It made me take risk. I didn't worry so much about what ifs. And that that is important because that's what gave me the gumption to leap and to try things. And I don't think we ever want to lose that. But what I also didn't have was, like, I didn't take the time to think through, like, oh, yeah, I don't want one client, because if that client goes away, all my resources. So some of it was just business maturity. Like, what am I doing to have business development on my mind at the same time that I'm serving the client? Like, those two things I didn't have connected. So that was part of it. In my 30s, that was one of the things. I would say in my 20s, I did it all on my own. And while I had, because of that fierce independence, there's again something really great about that. But I needed help. I needed a mentor. I needed feedback. I needed, like, there was so much I didn't know. And I just sort of had this idea that I'd figure it out as I went along, which is kind of true. But I didn't realize what support could do for me, like a mentor or staying learning. It's like, get around other entrepreneurs, other solopreneurs, put yourself in environments where you're able to talk about what's going on. I was my own counsel. I was my own strategist. I was my own problem solving bookkeeper, and it was like, I needed more. I needed more insight, more people, more education. So.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. Definitely, if we have a team that can work well together, a group of people that can uplift us, so that we can, that would be a wonderful access for us to grow and successful. And that remind us now, if we can continue sharing that and expanding our cares for people, that's the way that we will receive in cares again, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So which come to the last questions, and that we've been understanding what you want as the little girl. You want to be an actress, and you want to help the people, and then you try to go through a lot of uh, different paths in your life until you found your passions, and go in the not a linear way.
Yeah.
But all the things connecting so beautifully, and we want to ask you if there is anything that exciting that you are doing now and you want to share with us in advance, so that we can celebrate with you in advance for that.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's two things that I'm excited about. One is I'm building a platform so that I can create a global community of leaders from and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs from around the world that want to connect together and support each other, like we've been saying. And then the other thing is that over the last couple of years in particular, the conversation around inclusion and belonging inside of companies has become really important to me. And so I'm excited to be working and doing what I can to create more inclusive community in the work I do, as well as how to help companies and leaders who want to do that for themselves.
And I wish that to be a success. And I wish if there's anything that we could have in that path, please let us know. We wanna, contribute our abilities to that. All right. And
Yeah.
Barbara, thanks a lot again for joining our program and sharing your story. I have a good time. I hope that you have a good time too.
I did.
Yes, and I hope one day that we'll be able to see you in person. I'll invite you for a cup of coffees, and we talk about life, we talk about works.
Yes, when you're in Portland, you let me know. And thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for the heart you bring to it and your listening and the space you create and hold here in these conversations. And I'm grateful, and I have no doubt you're impacting so many people's lives.
Thank you very much for the kind word.
Yeah.
You have a wonderful evening, all right?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.